One of the most joyous times in our lives is when we have a new addition to our family. I'm sure we all have memories of younger brothers, sisters, cousins, nephews, nieces, and family friends being born and bringing so much happiness to our families. They are so small and helpless. They are dependent on their parents and on their families and don't stand a chance in this world without the love we have to offer them. We can't imagine life without them, and we try to do everything we can do to make sure that they are healthy and happy. For people around the globe, particularly those in poor countries, the birth of a child does not always bring joy. For many in Vietnam, this is the case. Not because they don't love their child or because they couldn't be bothered caring for them, but simply because they cannot afford it. For millions in Vietnam, this is the reality. They are forced to give up their children because they cannot offer them everything they need to survive. They cannot provide food, healthcare, or education. And in an attempt to give their children the best chance at life, they are forced to give them up to an orphanage. Last year in October, I spent only a single day in one of these refuges. I travelled to Vietnam to visit my sister, who had spent a little under 2 months volunteering at a small orphanage in the city of Hanoi. When I arrived, I was struck by the poverty of this bustling city. I spent my first afternoon becoming acquainted with the city and taking in the many cultural offerings of Hanoi. It was beautiful and charming in its own unique way. However, I knew that there was more to this city lurking beneath the surface, and I was lucky enough to see more than what your typical tourist would see. The following morning, I met up with my sister, who was going to the shelter one last time. By this stage, she was used to the poverty of the area, but for me, it was all quite shocking. When I first walked into the orphanage, I was surprised by the lack of security. I simply followed my sister through the doors and no one asked any questions. No visitor sign-in, no ID, nothing. That worried me immediately. I compared it to Clancy and thought of the safety offered by the gates that surrounded our school, and I worried for the children within the orphanage. I made my way further into the seemingly quiet centre. It was more like an old church that had some buildings connected on the sides, and it was in those side buildings that I could see the children. Each room catered to a different age group, and each room was under the care of 1 or 2 women. The rooms were no bigger than a classroom, and jammed into each cell were at least 6 double beds. On each bed were at least 6 or 7 children. That meant that there were upwards of 30 babies vying for the attention of 1 or 2 women. Out of the 8 or so hours that I spent there, I tried to play and interact with as many children as possible, but there were two children who I remember the most. The first is a young girl in this picture. It was her sadness that has stayed with me till this day. My sister gave me a bit of a backstory about her, and I just felt this young girl deserved more. My sister explained that when she first arrived at this orphanage, the young girl in the yellow dress had a cast on her arm. Despite the language barrier, my sister, Alex, was able to decipher that the reason for this was that she had fallen off the bed that the children were forced to sit on all day. As a result of this, the women who ran this orphanage, and who truly tried their best to help the children in any way they could, felt that the only safety measure they could take was to tie all of the toddlers to the bed to ensure there were no more injuries. When Alex first arrived at this place, all the toddlers were tied to bedposts and were not able to move around. It was only my sister's second week there that a young American couple came with an invaluable gift. The gift of rubber flooring to cover the concrete floors that threatened the safety of the children. It was only as a result of this donation that the children were untied. Alex realised the power of her donation and made a plea back home. With the money that she raised in a couple of days, she was able to buy all of this. The children in these images were putting on their first pair of shoes, but for them, they were more than just shoes. They were their passport to freedom. Just as the toddlers were tied to their beds, the older children were not allowed outside their small rooms unless they had shoes. Alex's collection meant more to these children than we could imagine. The second child who still haunts me is this newborn. He was only 1 day old when he was dropped off at the orphanage. The mother was very distressed when she was forced to leave him there, but she told the monks who ran the orphanage that there was nothing she could do. She had nothing, no home, no money, no job. She felt that it was in her best interest to leave the child there until she could raise some money and take care of her son. Here today, I know we can thank God for the blessings we have received in our lives. It is up to us to continue to make a difference in the world and to do our best to make the lives of those living in the orphanages as comfortable as possible. When you are donating money, consider the difference your donations can make. If it wasn't for the donations, the toddlers in Hanoi could still have been tied to the bedposts. Your donations do make a difference, even if you don't always see it. Please give generously.